Heritage for the Future's ability to translate so many different unique abilities into fun and entertaining characters is maybe the coolest thing about it from a casual perspective. Turning a power that you couldn't even imagine being something a player could control into a fighting game moveset takes some serious talent, even if the result isn't a super strong character. In today's case, well, Capcom's design team managed to create a character that is both incredibly unique, very cool to watch, but also highly polarizing. Folks, give a warm welcome to Alessi. And believe me, this is going to be a strange one, maybe even stranger than the guy himself. Alessi's highly eccentric personality and beautiful hair belie one of the most interesting characters in this colorful roster. There's not a lot about Alessi that can be called conventional. He's a character of extreme strengths, killer weaknesses, and an overall odd kit. His power to shave years off the age of anyone who steps into his shadow via the stand Satan was translated into the game through his most unique ability, but as a whole, Alessi is a grab bag of weird that we gotta dive in to really understand. I've heard from many sources that Alessi was top tier in JoJo's Venture, the first version of the game before the Heritage for the Future update, and while I can't say why, I can tell you that his reputation was quite strong in the early days of Heritage too. You can easily find old tier lists from as recently as 2018 with Alessi in or trailing the top 10, and being placed in the same tier as the likes of Jotaro and New Kakyoin, characters who now completely overshadow him. So things have changed quite a lot for Alessi, but why is that? Well, let's find out. First things first, Alessi represents the most uncommon of the three stand types in Heritage, a weapon stand. Weapon stands and active stands both share numerous similarities in how they work. Both can summon their stand to change their moveset slightly through pressing the S button. Among the benefits gained from being in stand-on are immunity to chip damage and being knocked down, as well as Magic Series combos, although this is actually one of the benefits Alessi misses out on. Active stand characters also gain access to a double jump, and every weapon stand besides Joseph can technically do this under circumstances that are too lengthy for me to explain right now. The biggest difference is that active stands have access to tandem supers with 214S, but that same input will instead activate custom combos for weapon stands. Custom combos are a mechanic from Street Fighter Alpha 2 which lets you chain together normals and specials, whereas tandems instead have you program a sequence of attacks for your stand to perform. That's the gist of it, but Alessi manages to separate himself from the other two weapon stands in quite a few ways. Compared to Chaka's sword and old Joseph's spines, Alessi's stand is a shadow which literally never leaves the ground. That obviously changes some of the ways that you'll be able to utilize his stand. Starting in Standoff though, the first thing to note is that Alessi is pretty tiny. He's just a small little guy, and this offers the advantage of a remarkably tiny hurt box. He can duck under a ton of different standing normals, not a complete get out of jail free card, believe me, but still something to keep in mind. We start things off with Alessi's jabs, which are very solid. 5A and 2A both sport short range, but compensate with quick speed and fantastic advantage on hit. 5A is plus 11 on hit, 2A is plus 8, and 2B is plus 9. All three of these normals can link into 5C, which is his main way of confirming into big damage. 5A itself has 4 frame startup, which means you can link it out of a ton of stuff, so Alessi's routing is quite versatile. His dash normals similarly open up combo opportunities, and thanks to Alessi's far-reaching dash, he can use them to score punishes from longer ranges. Also, they all share the same animation, which is funny. Alessi has a really friggin' good sweep. This shit is fast in terms of startup and recovery, not to mention it has very long reach. It's a great poke you can use to check opponents in neutral, and you can cancel it into roll on whiff in order to maintain your safety. JA is a fantastic normal that allows him to set up very ambiguous left-right mix-ups thanks to the cross-up potential. Stand-on Alessi mostly trades range for speed, but the range comes in once we activate Alessi's stand. Alessi's stand-on normals have a very notable quirk I'll talk about later, so for now, let's just look at them in the most positive light possible. Satan is a shadow which extends beyond Alessi's body, and his stand-on normals extend from the floor, even many of his air normals. He also gains a rather uncommon ability for this game in stand-on, which is proximity normals. Being close enough to his opponent while in stand-on will trigger them. I believe the reason for this is because some of his far stand-on normals have dead zones which would cause them to whiff at close range. I know this because if you're not close enough to do the proximity normals, his stand-on normals will whiff, so be wary of your distance compared to the opponent when in stand-on. The final quirk of Satan is that you can actually extend its length past the default distance. Holding S when going into stand-on will slightly extend the stand's reach and greatly increase the range, potentially letting you attack at an even greater distance than normal. Keep in mind that the range at which some of Alessi's stand-on normals hit is affected by the length of Satan, so you'll have to account for that if you're planning to expand. Anyway, Alessi's stand-on normals are limited in their utility due to that thing I said I'd elaborate on later, but at the very least they do have good range, which can make them solid for poking. Stand-on 5C and Dash 5C in particular are both very good pokes to throw out in neutral thanks to their safety, and he has a command overhead with stand-on 6B. His stand-on JA also maintains the standoff version's cross-up potential. Unfortunately, many of his normals in stand-on mode aren't special or super cancelable, so the damage opportunities off of these long-range pokes is fairly limited. Still, Alessi enjoys stand-on mode when he wants to play more defensively, not too dissimilar to most characters in the roster, and Satan is pretty solid in that regard. Talking about Alessi's specials requires me to go into his most unique mechanic, but before that, let's talk about his best special move, the gun. 41236X will have Alessi pull out a gun. This is one of his strongest tools and an absolutely iconic attack. It's far from a standard projectile, which is obvious when we compare it to something like Whole Horse or Abdul's 236X. Rather than firing a projectile, this move will spawn a cursor on screen at 3 different locations. Tapping any of the 3 attack buttons will fire up to 13 shots from the gun, after which Alessi will put it away. Let me explain why this is a killer move. The range is fantastic and gives Alessi very solid screen presence. The C version starts the cursor at damn near half screen, giving him a way to threaten most characters from almost any range. The actual gunshot's massive pushback and damage on both block and hit makes this one of the scariest offensive options Alessi has to his name. Some matchups are miserable purely because the opponent kinda just has to hold the gunshots and all the damage that comes with it. You can actually make the gunshots unblockable with precise enough timing. The gun is very good, make no mistake, but it ain't perfect. 14 frame startup and 33 frame recovery means that if the opponent outruns the admittedly fast cursor, you can end up eating a big punish, so be careful using this move. Holding any 2 attack buttons in stand-on will cause Alessi to charge this very large special. The long charge time is a bit awkward, but it does sport nice range and is thus helpful in combos. 63214X greatly changes based on if you're in standoff or stand-on. In standoff it's not great. Alessi sends a slow wave of energy along the ground. It's pretty sluggish and not very practical to use. With the stand-on, it becomes significantly faster, making it a sneaky option at close range. His 2 supers are decent. 236AA has invincibility and the travel range isn't bad, but it moves pretty slow. You can use it as a reversal in certain situations, but that's really it. 214AA, well, 50 frame startup is certainly something. The fairly large vertical hitbox would make this seem like a good anti-air, and it can be since it's air unblockable, but it's just so fucking sluggish. They both kinda get overshadowed by custom combo, but I'll get to that in a bit. These supers and specials also offer one final major advantage, which is that they allow Alessi access to his character defining gimmick and the ace up his sleeve, Alessi mode. This is a state that he will enter after hitting enemies with certain specials and supers. Upon entering Alessi mode, the opponent is turned into an almost defenseless baby. We'll call this child mode, and Alessi gains a new, more confident demeanor and an altered set of normals for about 3 seconds or so. The actual transformations vary a bit across the roster. Most characters get turned into children, some turn into background characters or minor villains. Old Joseph turns into young Joseph, and young Joseph turns into younger Joseph. And Khan gets turned into a cow. This one is still beyond my understanding. So, Alessi mode. Alessi's standoff normals in this mode change a decent amount, gaining access to new jabs and axe swings. The main breadwinner of Alessi mode are his dash normals. They all share 5C's animation and it does very solid damage. Since the opponent can't do much outside of jumping and moving in Alessi mode, and they also can't block, this period of time is all about stacking up damage on the helpless character you've transformed. Alessi still has access to the gun, so you'll typically want to chain together as many dash 5Cs before ending it with the gunshot. This gives Alessi access to good damage already, but the main thing that makes Alessi mode so strong is how it synergizes with his custom combo. Now the damage you do during a custom combo is heavily scaled, which is why you'll occasionally see custom combos from Chaka and even old Joseph do incredibly low damage even off of a single hit starter. Alessi suffers from this issue and it normally would tank his damage potential, if not for Alessi mode. Alessi can end his custom combo string with an Alessi mode activation, and from here, the party really starts. The dash 5C chains into gunshots can absolutely chunk even high defense characters and allow Alessi to cash out big time for just 1 bar. This is exactly what makes his standoff normals so good. The combo flexibility offers him many ways to confirm into custom combo, and from that, you can turn the opponent into a child and chop him up. However, there's more to Alessi mode than it seems at first glance. It's not just a roster-wide case of easy damage. Some child modes are different from others, since every child mode has varying hurtboxes and animations. This changes things quite a lot across different matchups. Against some characters, Alessi might be able to get 5 or 6 -5Cs before a gunshot ender, and against some, he'll only get 3. Characters like Rubber Soul and Kawn are absolutely huge in child mode, so getting tons of swings on them is easy. On the other hand, some characters have downright tiny hurtboxes, such as Pet Shop and Vanilla Ice. Somehow this bastard manages to be among the most privileged characters even in what's supposed to be an immensely disadvantaged state. Another factor affected by the hurtboxes of child mode characters is keeping them grounded. Upbacking is typically the most common response against Alessi when he's got the axe out, since jumping can cause -5C to whiff, and because of this, you need to time your first axe swing so that it hits meaty, meaning that it hits as soon as they become vulnerable on the later frames of -5C. Doing this leaves you with more frame advantage to follow up with another -5C, making his Alessi mode damage more consistent. If you miss your meaty, it's very easy for the opponent to just hold up back and waste the already limited time you have, so make sure you know your timing. Also, I mentioned that child mode characters are almost defenseless, and that's because they can actually still attack while in the mode. Obviously it's much more limited than what they usually have access to, but it's still something, I guess. Most child mode characters' attacks are pretty terrible, but some of them are at least annoying enough to make you raise an eyebrow. Some of Young Joseph's are like actually solid buttons with good hitboxes to offset the terrible damage and lack of combo potential. Vice's child mode attack is also notable for shrinking his already small hurtbox down even further, which can actually cause some of Alessi's normals to whiff. Funny stuff. The changes to how Alessi utilizes his special mode can make or break certain matchups, but Alessi mode as a whole is still remarkably powerful. However, it doesn't completely excuse some of his flaws. Let's start with maybe the silliest one. So a few minutes back I mentioned his stand-on normals having a property that I explain later. I think it's about time I get to doing that. So you know what hurtboxes and hitboxes are, right? Those blue and red boxes represent the point where a character's attack will connect and where attacks will connect on the character. Hitbox and hurtbox placement can be very important to deciding how good a button can be. Some buttons are absolutely cracked because of this. So how are Alessi's? Oh. Some of these buttons just have woefully shitty hurtbox placement that really harms their use as pokes. And the biggest victim of this are his stand-on normals. These are cursed with a particularly shitty flaw. The hurtboxes are absolutely gigantic on some of these. That's a big enough problem on its own, but even bigger than that is the fact that these hurtboxes appear before they become active. This hurts Alessi's stand-on normals and makes them extremely risky to use in many matchups. I mean, just look at this. Alessi's stand-on potential for poking is squandered heavily by how easy it is for them to trade or straight up lose to other characters' normals because of the preemptive hurtboxes. And it's a shame because these normals have really solid range, but damn man. Another complication that sprouts as a result of this hurtbox situation is anti-airs. Obviously his normals in Standoff aren't exactly suited to this purpose, but his stand-on normals, at first glance anyway, have good anti-air angles. Stand 5B and 2B in particular both are deceptively strong looking anti-airs, but because of the preemptive hurtboxes fucking jutting out, they usually lose to jump-ins. Considering that being in stand-on promotes more defensive playstyles thanks to the immunity from chip and the fact that you can't roll, having this kind of major weakness kinda fucking sucks. In most situations, Alessi's best option to beat jump-ins is his very strong guard cancel. Can you believe I've made like 5 videos on this game and this is the first time I've even mentioned guard cancels? Anyway, Alessi's is very good. It's one of the faster ones in the game and it has pretty good range. Just be careful that your opponent doesn't bait it. Alessi also suffers from fairly linear mix, especially in Oki situations. Most of his combos go into Alessi mode when he has the meter, but he doesn't really get Oki Zeme off of this since child mode deactivating causes the opponent to return to neutral instead of getting knocked down. Mid-screen, his Alessi mode combos will usually leave him very far from his opponent, which doesn't help. He can do some tricky cross-up stuff during custom combos and with his JA, but as a whole, it can be a struggle to open people up and get hits outside of punish situations. And this is a particularly big problem in some of his matchups. Alessi's matchups. This is commonly why he's considered very polarizing. You'll often see him in the middle of recent tier lists, and a big part of this is that while he absolutely gatekeeps and shits on lots of low tiers, he kinda just loses hard to some high tiers, and especially the top tiers. Let's cover the latter first. I know it's sort of common sense that the mid tier loses to the top tiers, but let's get more into it. Due to Alessi's awful stand-on hurt boxes, he obviously gets outpoked hard by a lot of the top tiers. Buttons like Polnareff's stand-on 4B and Jotaro's stand-on 5B are infamous for being very low commitment ways to stop approaches, so throwing out giant hurt boxes against these moves is ill-advised. Alessi's gun is one of his best tools, and a big part of that is the chip damage it does, but since almost all the top tiers are active stands, they don't take chip damage while in stand-on, which really hurts his ability to beat out Turtling since he can't threaten active stands when they have the life lead. More to the point, he just struggles to really get anything done. Many of the top tiers are extremely good at laming out because of their double jumps and excellent buttons, something Alessi has a fairly hard time stopping. If he was better at anti-airing, it might not be so bad, but the way things are, your biggest struggle can often be trying to force your opponent to play the game instead of playing the lame. Often he finds himself outclassed in neutral and damage, and many character-specific tools like Shooting Star, Kakyoin's nets, and Vice's incredibly fast rolls and air dashes can be a struggle for Alessi to contend with. However, these matchups aren't as bad as they used to be, and I'll explain why. So, a quick heads up, a lot of this tech was discovered by Nico, who is one of, if not the best Alessi player currently, so massive shoutouts to them go, and apologies if I'm not able to explain it very eloquently since I don't play this character. As a base, custom combo into Alessi mode ender is already solid damage, but where Alessi's damage really starts to shine is against stand-on characters. If Alessi manages to stand crash an opponent, he can perform a reset using an unblockable setup. A reset is when you intentionally drop a combo in the hopes of landing another starter. In this situation, the unblockable helps Alessi start a new combo guaranteed after the stand crash, and since it's a new combo, that means you wouldn't have to deal with the scaling of continuing after the first stand crash. The damage Alessi gets from this is insane and allows him to deal upwards of 80% on punishes. Against many characters he can easily score a touch of death, but otherwise it makes his damage extremely scary. It's important to keep in mind that this only applies to characters in stand-on. Against characters who spend a lot of time in that state like Abdul and New Kakyoin it's particularly effective, but a character like say Polnareff who does the opposite and stays in stand-off for long periods of time, he might not be able to exploit this as much. The only top tier this doesn't apply to is Pet Shop, since he's a passive stand, but Pet Shop is also Pet Shop. Icicles are still broken, and Alessi's poor anti-airs are also a pretty big factor here when trying to swat the bird. It definitely closes the gap, but Alessi is still outclassed in many ways by the top tiers. However, like I said, he is the gatekeeper of the low tiers. Even though he's far from the strongest character, he arguably destroys many of the game's low tiers just as bad as the top tiers do. Mariah, Hoingo and Hole, Khan, Black Polnareff, and Young Joseph find themselves in quite a miserable situation against Alessi. These matchups are where the gun gets its chance to shine in a big way, since these characters are all passive stands and have no way to nullify the chip damage. Even without access to stand crash resets, his damage against these characters is very high purely because of the gun. Some characters legit just can't do anything about Alessi's tools and defensive playstyle. Examples are Mariah and Hole, who normally rely heavily on zoning and anti-airs in matchups where they can't consistently gain access to their strong Oki, can't really even do that because Alessi can just hang back and use gun and his strong sweep to control space. These two characters have really good chip damage, but weapon stands don't care about that. Alessi vs Mariah is especially notable for how fucked it is. This is beyond miserable. Alessi has answers for basically everything she wants to do. He can cut down cables or punish the startup with custom combo. Sweep and gunshots make it hard for her to get anything started because all of her zoning tools have fairly high startup, and any damage she does with zoning or cables is basically matched by one custom combo into Alessi mode sequence. All she really has is outlets, which can be annoying against Alessi's stand-on hurt boxes, but not enough to offset what Alessi has over her. Khan can be a bit problematic because his mobility is decent and he actually has damage, but he gets lamed out pretty hard, and his child mode being a big-ass cow makes it easy to farm damage on him in Alessi mode. The stark contrast between how he handles characters below and above him is probably the most fascinating thing about this character. He crushes so many weaker characters, but he can also get absolutely shit on by others. Sometimes he gets bullied, sometimes he does the bullying. Regardless, he's a very cool and unique character. It was a lot of fun getting to learn more about the character and seeing all the new tech that's allowed him to improve in the current meta. I really have a level of appreciation for how people continue to grind this game and help the meta evolve. Nico's discovery of new tech for Alessi is something I very much respect. And besides them, there's also Guru Slum, who doesn't play the game anymore I believe, but was quite a prolific Alessi and got second place at Anime-Evo 2020, as well as Tensho and Master Chief. Alessi is a strange character with some very odd things holding him back, but when he finally gets his chance to flex, he can be downright terrifying. Anyway, that's all for now. Let me know what you think of Alessi in the comments below. Thank you for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey guys, this is the part of the video where I thank all my lovely, beautiful, amazing channel members. Thank you to Mortis, Jazba, Kami the Killer, Triangle God, and Old Man Han. If you'd like to become a channel member, there'll be a link in the description. It's $2.99 USD, and you get a shout out at the end of every video. Thank you again to every one of my channel members who are all beautiful and amazing, and I love you all. Thank you for watching, have a great night, and take care.